Here we are. Welcome to the Bungalows for Bachelors Condensed Home Building Program. You're going to learn how to build a house real quick this time. This particular video is designed to be a condensed version of the more drawn out and more detailed home building program. I will be putting the links in the description below for you to go click on if you want to learn more about each individual piece as we go. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, the first thing that every home builder is going to start with is going to be the architectural plans. If you don't have the project defined on the architectural plans, you're not going to be able to go very far. Pretty much no builder is going to take you seriously. You're not even going to know like how to cost estimate anything because there's no walls, there's no scope, there's nothing defined. So the first thing is you got to get some architectural plans. Now, where are you going to get them? You can get them from an architect if you want to pay a bunch of money for a very detailed, very specific, very well put together set of plans if that's the kind of product that you want. Or you can go to a draftsman. They're generally going to be a little bit cheaper. They're going to be able to produce a set of plans that are good enough for you to build your house. And frequently, personally, I don't build houses with 100% set of plans. I want to build a house with an 80% solution set of plans. And then the last 20% of all the details and all the selections, everything, you're going to figure that out as you're building. You're going to change things. So it's kind of, in my opinion, a waste of time and money to get your first set of plans dialed out of the gate. You're just not going to be able to do it. So either you go with the 100% solution or the 80% solution. Either way, before you start, you're going to need to know what kind of house you want. So find some images, find some stuff that you can use as like a concept, and you're going to have to go through that process. Now, if you want to learn how you can do that, I have links in my community and files that I give out that help people walk through that process. So, you can use online CAD programs and things like that are going to help you doodle around, use SketchUp, free versions of things to like play with ideas. But ultimately, if you're going to get the set of plans, unless you're going to be buying professional software, learning how to use it and produce drawings, then you're just going to take all those ideas to somebody who knows how to draw them in a professional way so that the industry is going to know how to work with them. So yeah, get yourself some architectural plans. Now, the next thing, the structural plans. Depending on where you're building is going to dictate whether you need an engineered stamp on the architectural plans or an engineered stamp on the structural set of plans built on top of the architectural set of plans. If you're out in the county somewhere, most of the time, you're probably not going to need an engineered stamp on something. Now, that doesn't mean you don't go get it. Maybe you want to have that engineered stamp on your plans and you want an engineer to go through your building and check out all the structural details. Most of the time in residential construction, that's not going to be necessary just because houses are built typically fairly simple. If you have a complex, huge custom home, maybe it might be worth doing. But basically, the structural plans are going to be defining all of the wood details and the beam sizes and this, that, and the other. That's going to help people know that when your house is put together, it's going to be up to code. It's going to be totally stiff and strong. And let's be real, code has pretty low standards. So, getting an engineer involved for stiff, straight beams might be a good idea. So either you go find an engineer, or basically, if you don't need the stamp, you can find somebody who you trust that is capable of understanding whether that's like a framer who's been doing it for a long time, or it's a builder who understands very frequently what engineers are asking for, or just, it could be anybody. If it's me here at Stevenson Integrated Designs, Bungalows for Bachelors, you can reach out to me either way. But just find somebody who's familiar with what you need and can solve your problem for you. So once you have your structural plan, there's going to be some level of detail here. This is the 20% part that I was talking about before. The details can be part of that 20%. You don't need all these details to be specified. If you're going to be building a house yourself especially, you don't need all these details specified up front if you know you're going to be doing them, because basically what's going to happen is as you're building, you're going to figure out your details as you go. If another builder is responsible for your project and you're going to have a whole bunch of crazy air detailing and insulation detailing and this, that, and the other, and that's going to drive his prices way up, like it's up because of the framers and the siding guys, like they're not used to doing that work. It's going to take more time because it's going to cost more money. Like that stuff needs to be brought up front. But if you're going to be involved and you're going to be contracting, you're going to be the head and the brain behind your build, then you don't really have to worry about this at this stage. But know that details are kind of important and that stuff should be thought about at some point. You should at least have it in mind that you need to think about it. So if you need to be writing them down in a plan for whatever reason, whether a city wants to see it or whatever, go find an architect or a draftsman or an engineer or whatever who's going to draw these details for you. Get them on your plan. And if you don't even know what kind of details you might want yet, then you ought to be researching. There's tons of people on YouTube who make all kinds of building science videos, all kinds of detailing videos, construction videos. Everybody out there is building their own houses these days. So go check out what everybody else is doing. See the way they are doing their details. Not every detail is going to fit for everyone because some details will turn a $200,000 house into a $2 million house. So you got to balance the budget with your build, of course. But that said, building science is intricately related to the detailing. Your house as an environment separate from the outside environment. So you want to keep the air out or the air in, and you want to keep the water out, and you want to keep the humidity and the vapor controlled, and you want to control all of these things, the thermal heat loss and all this, that, and the other. You're trying to make your home a separate space from the outside. That's the whole point. And so there's all kinds of crazy fun details and cool stuff we can do to make our homes more efficient or more comfortable or whatever, keeping the bugs out, you name it. Obviously, those are all great things we want to do, but there's a wide range of building standards that people build from, all the way from, your wall's going to hang off your foundation by 2 inches and there's going to be a gap underneath it and who knows what else is going on, to like, oh, this is like crap. This is built with craftsmanship. It's clean. It's straight. Everything's nice. It's well sealed. There's no gaps. There's going to be a long, water's not going to damage this joint, whatever, there's a huge range of possibilities. So you got to know what you can afford. You got to know what you want. And so go out and do your research. So long story short, do you need building science? Yes, because you're going to basically just be choosing somewhere where you are on the risk curve. Building science is all about how much money do I want to spend to make the rest of my future better, more comfortable, easier, cheaper, whatever. And so you're basically mitigating risks. So by building like plain house to minimum code standards and stuff, you're going to get a house that's going to do fine. Like we don't build houses terribly like we used to. It just depends on how much money you're willing to trade for that level of product, that high-end level of product. Now, of course, before you build a house and potentially before you design a house, you ought to know where it's going to go because that can have a large impact on the way you design it, where the door accesses are, where the windows are with the sun, who like you name it. I mean, if there's like a utility thing, like the electrical's over here and the water's over here and all these stuff, like it all matters. It all affects the build. And so you ought to be familiar with, hopefully you've got some land or you know what land you want to build on or something like that. Or maybe you just, you're going to try to plop it down on a regular old city lot and you're just going to have water and sewer out front and, AT&T or communications or whatever you got, right? It's going to be pretty typical. And then it's no big deal. But if you're going to be building somewhere farther out into the boonies, you really ought to know what you have access to and what you don't, because that's going to affect how easy it is to build, how expensive it is to build. You've now got to get all the logistics of your materials taken care of out there. You've got to do all kinds of extra stuff. So basically, your water, what are you going to do with the water, right? Okay, now it becomes either gray water or black water. Power, you can have electric, you can have gas. And of course, your communications, the Wi-Fi and phone companies. Am I going to have to get a satellite? Like, what am I going to have to do there? So there's all kinds of ways that our homes are going to interact with our environment and the infrastructure that we live in that we want to know about so that we don't buy a house and we can't put it on our land because, in order to run power out here, it's going to cost me $30,000 in telephone poles or whatever, and I can't afford that. So whatever it is, So be aware what's on the site. For example, if you're sitting on 300 feet of solid rock and the only way to get water is by drilling, then guess what? You're going to be drilling, and that could make your build not worth doing. So these are things to think about when you're getting land. If you've got that figured out, you've got a plan, structure's kind of defined, you've got 80% of this thing figured out, then you're going to start to be getting close to figuring out how much it's going to cost you. What people frequently misunderstand about the whole costing process is they'll go to a builder and they'll say, "Hey, how much is my house going to cost?" A builder with a lot of experience is going to be able to get a ballpark. Specifics of a house price are going to be based on kind of average industry prices, typically, if you're going to build a pretty regular house and you're not going to do crazy details or any fancy building science stuff. Between those and pre-established budgets, like, hey, your bathtub can cost this much, your sinks can cost this much. They're going to be putting allowances into your budget. And if you go over those, then you want nicer stuff. Then, hey, okay, you're going to have to fork out more. But like trying to get an idea of that cost estimate. Because maybe you're crazy and you're trying to build this thing with cash. Like, who knows what your position is. But certainly if a bank is getting involved, they're going to need to know how expensive this house is going to be. And the bank's not going to listen to Joe Schmo who thinks his house is going to cost $50K to build if it's a 5 million square foot house. They're just not going to listen to that. They're going to listen to people who are trusted industry builders who maybe they've worked with before, or people who have a reputation, or whatever it is, because like the lender's not going to want to just hand out $500,000 for someone to go build something that doesn't work, or something that actually costs $800,000 to build instead of $500,000. And now the bank has this half-built asset sitting on their hands, and like they have to fork out the money to either finish it and hope it'll sell, and just like it's just a mess. Cost estimates, you're either going to get them from someone who has those numbers, industry numbers, they're going to understand about per square foot what your house is going to be built for, or you're going to put on your bootstraps and you're going to hike your pants up. You're going to tuck your shirt in, you're going to put your belt on, and you're going to figure out how much the thing costs yourself by using Excel files, CAD, whatever you need to do to like do all this material estimating and all this stuff. And there's a lot that goes into that. So just be aware that this is a very important part and a complicated part. So do not underestimate it. Now, there was a time when people could build houses and permitting was not this important thing. Nowadays, with banks, lenders, financing, liabilities, insurance, all this crazy stuff that goes on, there's all these checks and balances that have to exist in some certain systems where people are going to know they're going to get a certain product. So basically, someone said, hey, why don't we create a governing system of some kind that says we want this thing to happen. The governing system will make sure this thing happens through inspections and permits and paperwork and fees and all of this stuff. And that system is going to theoretically guarantee or help guarantee an end product for a mass number of people. So that's the system that we have today. And depending on where you live, you're either going to be in a great system for permitting or a terrible system for permitting, depending on how you prioritize things. Maybe you love permits and you want everything to be permitted and you just want to know everything's going to be great. Cool. Then, go to like Austin, Texas or something where you're just going to get a nightmare. The alternative is to go out into the county, somewhere in Nebraska where nobody cares about anything, and you can go build your little shed. And if it falls on you, then no one's probably even going to find you. So like, what's the big deal? Okay. So permits are just a name of the game. Like if you're going to be building a house or building a structure of any kind, and you plan on not living forever and owning it forever, it's going to have to be sold at some point. And so you should just be aware that like, if you're going to participate in the game, you should play the game properly. So get your permits where you need to. You're either going to source them from, small jurisdictions like the HOA for your neighborhood, all the way to your city, your county, your like utility purveyors for like developers. Like if they're going to tap into mains and stuff like that, they got to get permits for that. And of course, if you happen to be like over a water aquifer or recharge area or something, and the people are very particular about like controlling the waste, construction waste and like debris and stuff that gets in waterways, then you ought to be aware that you got to get permits for that. And that gets kind of messy. But if you happen to be putting a driveway connecting to a highway or something out in the middle of like Texas or somewhere, then you may end up getting a permit to connect that driveway so that it's built to the standards that the state would want you to build it to. Now, the last topic here in pre-construction is you got to be thinking about how are you going to get your materials, where are they going to come from? And this is not just like the wood, right, to build your house. You're going to have to get cabinets, you're going to have to get windows, you're going to have to get doors, you're going to have to get probably like dirt engineered fill if you're going to be excavating and regrading and doing all kinds of stuff with your foundation. All that stuff has to come from somewhere. And so if you're not going to go to a builder who's going to do his own thing and you're trying to figure out what you're going to use, then you got to source those things, figure out how close they are. Maybe your closest concrete batch plant is, 50 miles away. That's going to be kind of annoying, but like it's just something to factor in. There's probably going to be extra prices for that. So be aware. This is another category that people frequently underestimate. And they're like, oh, how hard can it be for the builder to just get my materials on site? All he's going to do is make the order and it'll show up. It's not that much work. Yeah, well, it's not that much work until your lumber falls off your truck. And all of a sudden, the lumber truck guy is like, well, sorry. And then you got to pick it up and move it. And the only way to do that is typically by using your hands. Because in this particular case, this fell off into a little bit of a ditch and the forklift couldn't quite scoop it up properly. And so there was a lot of hand moving. And this was like a few hundred feet away from the slab where the wood should have been dropped off. So things happen. And, this is the responsibility of the person procuring the material. So be prepared for things to happen because they can. And that's all I got for pre-construction, guys. So if you enjoyed this stuff, again, check out the description below for links to the longer videos where I went into more detail on each one of these topics. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you on the next one.